Call the meeting of the Willits City Council order for Wednesday, July 27th. Can we all stand? Join me in the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, who's here?
Let's find out. Councilmember Stransky?
Yes.
Strong?
Here.
Madrigal?
Here.
Orenstein?
Sounds like let's make a deal. Here.
Mayor Burton?
Here. Before we jump into any of our agenda this evening, I know that Adrian would like to make some introductions.
I would, thank you.
Of our auditors.
Yes, so our auditors, our new auditors are here this week doing their work, and with us tonight is Derek Ramcone, who's the audit manager assigned to us. He's from Moss, Levy, and Hartson? Thank you. And they are up from Culver City.
Oh. Wow. Well, welcome to Northern California.
Thank you.
Sorry about the heat.
No, it's great. I grew up in Vacaville, so I'm somewhat used to the heat. I just wanted to introduce myself real quick, let you guys know we're here for this week, and we'll be back in a week to do final field work. We're visiting different departments this first week, taking a look at the airport, the corporation, public works yard, looking at finance receipts, including business license, and kind of touching base with all the different locations and just seeing what's out there, whether it be inventory, safeguarding of assets, whether it's gasoline or supplies, taking a look at just around at all the different locations to see what's out there. And we'll be having a report with our recommendations for if there are anything that we need to recommend. We'll be issuing that at the end of the audit. So.
Derek.
Okay, Derek, thank you. I know that we're going to have a meeting with you here in a couple days. Do we have any questions for him at this point? Well, we'll look forward to meeting you again and getting your presentation of the audit later in the fall.
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, thank you very much for coming by. Enjoy your evening.
I'll go back to work.
Okay. So our next real item is public communications. This is for people that wish to address the city council on issues that are not on the agenda. No action will be taken, and there really isn't a chance for a dialogue in this, but you got 3 minutes to speak. There's a light there on the right of the podium that will give you a warning when you're closing in on your appointed time. Do we have anybody who'd like to address the council? Yes, ma'am. Got you back there.
My name is Barbara Plaza. I'm the new owner of 143 Franklin Avenue. This has been such a controversy for me. I talked to the city civil engineer, Jeremy, last year. He told me about sidewalk plan that he talked to John Sherman about it because they were supposed to get a grant this year. It's really strange to me that there was a lot of money set aside 3 years ago for Franklin Avenue. Jeremy told me that don't build your house this year, Barbara, 2015. Wait till next year. We're getting a grant for that. I call now, Franklin Avenue is put on the bottom list now, and I'd like to have that investigated. And I've been trying to get a hold of Adrian Moore to understand why in the world on November 6th, nobody's coming up to me and helping me understand why in the world I was held at gunpoint by Sergeant McNally on my property. He had his gun drawn on me on my property, ready to shoot me on my property because Bill Schaefer called him. I'd like to have that investigated. My phone number is 707-513-8434. Thank you very much for not helping me stay safe.
Yes, Barbara, thank you. Anybody else? I saw somebody in the back.
I'd like to just tell Barbara here that if she wishes, she can get a claim form at the clerk's office concerning that incident and fill it out. And
I don't know what that is.
Well, the clerk can help you.
They don't want to help me no more. Okay. I'm told I'm escorted out of the police department. The chief of police is involved in it. Fire department is involved in it.
Okay, thanks, Barbara. We're taking this about as far as we can this evening.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
These are copies of my presentation so that afterwards everyone has a copy.
Okay.
Thank you. David Pollan. I live in Willits for some years. I'd like to thank you all for your time, your dedication, and foresight for running our community. I'm here to share that handout that I gave you. This is a magazine that is in health food stores all over America, and on the other side is an advertisement that is in the magazine all over America for CBD oils. It has a section on it that explains the oils and that they're coming from Europe. And in order to put this out on a market, we're talking tonnage. We're not talking about people buying pot. We're not talking about dispensaries. We're not talking about community drug use or whatever. So I have a flow chart that I attached for an agricultural industry. It has some notes on it, and it represents that there are 4 major industries in the country and the state that want CBD oils and other cannabis products, and it's not just in our state. So there's a medical, there's recreation, there's the healthcare industry, and there's the culinary industry. And these represent tonnage of product. I'm here to ask the community to discuss possibly putting together an industrial park, a secure industrial park behind high walls with video, and that buildings in there will be used for manufacturing processes. The public will only have proper access through the security gates, and different industries can rent and use these areas. There are CBD oils on sale in stores in our town. There are foods on sale in stores in our town that contain CBD. It's all locked up, however that works. So I'm looking that we look at an industrial zone, and I'm suggesting it's based similar to rules in the Oregon Liquor Control Board, which controls the distribution in the state of Oregon. It's not a Mickey Mouse situation. I don't want children having it. When my children grew up and they went to Tamalpais High School, I was thrilled when they said, boy, those kids get loaded on the bus, and before, we don't want to know about it. It raised my heart to know that they were not being involved in that kind of thing, that they wanted their lives. She was a ballerina. She went to school in San Rafael every day. I picked her up, took her across. I'm suggesting that this company is from New Hampshire, and why would they go to European products? And it's a large quantity. We're not talking about someone selling a pound or this or that. We're talking about mass production. This could be important for this council, and to have this security and this income in our community safe behind walls, behind video, etc.
Start to wrap it up, David.
That's about it. I gave you the
Okay.
papers so that
Thank
I
you.
wouldn't take a lot of your time. You have my story, you have the advertisements which are distributed nationwide, and you have a chart that represents major industries. I don't know if everyone got one. I
Yes.
have so many copies,
Yeah.
but generally speaking,
We got
thank you
it,
very
and we
much
have
for
a
your
phone
time.
number that we can contact you if you need to.
I'm on a letterhead on the main
Yeah.
page, and I'm not particularly needing an answer. I'm making a proposal that you create a discussion and see about this. We are the gateway, and
Yeah.
there's no town from Eureka to Ukiah to Sacramento, and that's 3 counties that would be serviced by this area for
Thank you.
mass production. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kathy, there's a few extras if you wanted one.
Yes, do we still have them in the back that wish to speak?
Dr. Rood.
Yes, I'm Henry Rood, and I live across the street from our park here. I'm seeing the trees coming down now, and it's distressing. You know, I hate to see those beautiful trees go down. I understand the danger that trees may pose, you know, and I certainly don't want that, but I would feel much more comfortable for my own edification
if I knew that an arborist has checked these trees out more recently than 20 years ago, that it seemed like it was reported in the Willits Weekly, that our response to cutting these trees down is largely dependent upon or inspired by the report that was 20 years old. You know, has there been an arborist that has looked at the trees since that time? Is there any way that some of them could be saved? Or are we just cutting them all down without thoroughly checking it out?
We'll get you some answers if you haven't got them.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the council this evening? All right, main matter of our meeting this evening is to review and possibly adopt the fiscal budget for 16-17. I don't know, Adrian, you're going to start this, or Susie wants to weigh in? Last week, for purposes of starting the discussion, the last council meeting we discussed this, we were in a deficit condition of $462,000 and change. And so I think we directed staff to take another pencil to the budget and see what they could bring back. So that's what brought us here this evening.
Correct. So we have done that, and we've itemized what those adjustments are on the agenda summary that Susie put together. And so now we have a new number, a new projected deficit of $163,873. That's the result largely of doing a reorganization in our police dispatch services. But we made a number of other adjustments that council discussed at last week, or the last council meeting, as well as some adjustments. I think we got some new numbers on the truck filling station. So that is anticipated to bring in $100,000 revenue annually, but because it's not up and running just quite yet, we have estimated a lower number, since we're not going to realize the full benefit of July, which is right in the middle of the season for water needs. We've taken out a number of items. I mean, basically, I went back to staff last week and said, what can we defer? Let's, cut everything that we can, and that's what we have done. We've deferred things like a new fencing at the ball fields. That was budgeted for $21,000 and change. Let's see. We've adjusted some hire dates based on what looks like is going to be realistic. Removed the resealing and striping of City Hall parking lot. Reduced some cost in HR based on some historical information. A lot of those costs are associated with the police department. All the background checks, those expenses come out of the HR budget. So given that we're streamlining there and won't be doing the hiring that we anticipated, that number has been adjusted to reflect that. Legal services have been reduced by 10%. And we've removed some other miscellaneous things, including the records control services in the council clerk budget. And what that is we started a couple of years ago on modernizing our records management system. And so this was going to be the next phase of that. So we're proposing to defer that a year. Let's see, Susie, is there?
I think you pretty much got everything. The majority of the savings came from the reorganization of the police department. And I mean, you can see that we removed 1.15 FTEs from dispatch and another, 3/4 of an FTE from administration. I think from my perspective, going through the budget, it looks very lean and it doesn't look like there's a lot of room to cut more. I don't know where we would start. And I think it's also important to recognize that last year, when we started our budget process, we ended up with a $38,000 deficit after each department took a 5% cut. Every department went through and found some way to cut their budget to make that. And this year, we're having revenues reduced by $185,000. And so we're pretty much right there where we were last year. I just wanted to point that out.
If we had that 185,000 revenue, we would be better than break even.
Yeah.
We don't.
So as I said at the last council meeting, I feel that the best approach going forward is a combination of the adjustments that we've made here, as well as looking at potential revenue sources.
I do just want to take a minute to thank staff, I know, and everybody, because you were in a hard spot before, and now just like the record control services alone, like that's something that needs to happen, and we need to be able to respond to public records requests, and that's a process. So I understand having to defer it, but I just know that, especially, within the police department, these are very hard choices to make. So I want to thank you guys for the work that you have done since the last budget discussion.
I have two questions. First of all, with the reorganization of the police department, will the dispatchers be there all the time now? Are we going to have dispatchers? What's going to happen with that particular aspect of it?
With the scenario that we have proposed last week, the last council meeting, and what's reflected here, we maintain a 24/7 dispatch center.
Okay, so it will be open 24/7, every day, every night, whatever. It'll be open all the time. Or there'll be somebody on duty.
There will be somebody on duty 24/7. I think typically, I don't know what time exactly it is in the evening time, a little bit later in the evening, it may be 9 o'clock. They lock the door, but there's a buzzer at the front door that somebody can call and talk with a live person.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to point out that although, none of us are real comfortable projecting a deficit, but this budget shows us still having a working capital in the general fund at the end of the fiscal year of almost closer to 2.3 million still. So with that, it buys us some time to then look at the longer term ways that we can increase revenue to meet the budget in the future. So I feel like this is a pretty comfortable budget, and I really appreciate all the work that went into it, and also the personal sacrifices that are affecting some people and the workload that's affecting virtually everybody. But I think you've done a masterful job. Thank you.
I wanted to also point out that when you saw the budget at the last meeting, the general fund reserve was at 36%. Our fund policy is to maintain 35%. By doing these adjustments, that increased the reserve to 52%.
What two valves at the Morris Dam either are not going to be removed or are going to be removed, or what, for $25,000?
Those have been budgeted to purchase new valves, and the Main Street water line replacement project that's going on, they're going to repurpose two valves that are from that project over to the dam. So it was the right timing to be able to do that and remove that expenditure from the budget.
So what two valves are these? I mean, two valves in Morris Dam, I just wanted to know You know, are they at the bottom, are they at top? I mean, I
I
have
couldn't
no
tell you right
idea.
now.
I don't believe, yeah, I have no idea what the two valves are, Larry. I don't believe that they're we did the underwater work before. But my impression is that these aren't submersible valves.
Okay.
I don't know what they are.
I
I
would
w-
suggest, based on the cost, that they're not submersible.
But
But also
we
that
can
they-
find
We'll
out.
find out.
And
Thank
also
you.
that they are going to be replaced, we're just not going to have to pay as much because they're reusing them. I mean, that's great.
I mean, I think the thing that I think and correct me if I'm wrong here, Susie, the deficit in the water fund of $917,000 sounds pretty ominous, and it's been reduced to 697, but how much of the Main Street water line project is in this year's budget?
840,000.
So 840,000, so that's a capital, it's not an operations expense, it's a capital expense. It certainly reduces our capital account in the water department by $840,000 because we don't have any grant or any kind of support funding to do that, but we are actually operating the water fund in a balance or slightly overbalanced. If you add 840,000 to the 697 that's in arrears, you're ahead by 150 or something like that. So I just want to make people
That's a good point.
understand that, and the same, you know, we're going to have to capitalize the blowers in the wastewater plant too. That's a capital expenditure, and it's a cost shared one as well. But I thought those were, I can't remember, I thought they were 138 or 135. But anyway, that fund also really represents operationally the fees that are collected are paying for the services that provided. It's the capital, again, it's the capital accounts that are going to shrink because of the capital purchases.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, particularly for the public, that as we're all aware, a budget is, to put a bad face on it, I guess, an educated guess. I mean, it's very educated, but it is, when all is said and done, a guess. You know, our revenues come from a revenue service, and you know, they're based on certain parameters, and they come up with a number. And you know, I guess if we went back to look historically, they're off a little bit, up, plus, minus. But we don't have a whole lot of control over how much money comes into the city at this point. The expenses, of course, is something that we do have control over, and we have a number. And what was indicated is that you went back to all the departments and got them to, you know, really get lean. And I'm satisfied that this is about as lean as it gets. But that's not the end of it. Throughout the year, would you explain the process to make sure that the departments stay on budget?
Well, there's a few steps. First of all, when an invoice comes in and it's coded by the department head, once the person in AP is inputting, if they go over their budget, there's a red flashing light that says bunk, 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 and she lets me know, and at that point, we would go and talk to the department heads and let them know that they need to allocate money from somewhere else in their budget to cover this line item, or they need to come back to council and they need to say, you know, we need to do a budget amendment, which we've done in the past. Yeah, but there's always a conversation, or there's some type of correction.
And to my
Don't just
recollection-
let people go negative and.
And to my recollection, in past years, very often the expenses, the actual expenses are slightly less than they were budgeted for.
Right.
And this is a result of this the watching that you do and staying on top of it. So I guess what I'm saying is that even though we have a negative budget right now, it's not necessarily the way it's going to end up.
Right, last year we had a negative budget of 38,000 and we're projecting a gain of $267,000. So things happen throughout the year that, maybe we get a building that's built and they need sewer laterals or things that we.
But again, when you say it happens, I think it's important that it doesn't just happen, it's controlled to some degree.
Well, we do quarterly finance reviews of budget to actual.
And,
But does anybody wish to comments more, or someone want to start this in a motion?
I have a quick comment. Before we get to the motion, although I do get a sense that we might, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but I think we might be able to take it. What this reminds me of, though, is that we say this every year, but we need to work on the revenue side, and it can't just be lip service. It can't just be every time when it's budget, we talk about, how we need to raise revenue. We actually, I'm hoping that we as a council can commit to over the next, there's an election coming up, so hopefully before the election, we could make some commitments to pursuing a strategy for revenue development, and whether that's, as was mentioned in the legal cannabis field, or if that involves a tax, which none of us want to do, or if that involves some other revenue strategy, we need to get those on the table and make sure that we follow up with it so that another year doesn't go by with the same, because next year, if we have to cut another 10%, we're just not going to be able to do it. Without drastically, closing the pool, or just, drastically cutting some major things. So I just want, and this is really a thing to myself that if I have suggestions, I need to follow them up and bring them to the council for discussion, because we have to work on the revenue. We have to work on the revenue part.
One area that we could make progress on is there is a lot of grant money out there, but we don't have anybody in-house that can stay on top of those things and research those opportunities and gather the information, basically shepherd that through. But we use grants for public safety and at our airport, and there's water project funding and sewer. Recreational type grants, they are out there in all areas, but we don't have anybody in-house. And so my hope is to see if we could look at a position that would essentially pay for itself, a grants coordinator type position.
Would there be any, I know interns are occasionally more work than the effort that you get out, because you do have to, have to work on a program and things like that. But I wonder if that couldn't be like a master's project or something for someone who is, pursuing grant writing as a career, that could maybe be some way to keep the cost of the position low, frankly, because we don't have any money to pay anybody. But I was just in Fort Bragg and went to the CD Star Center, which was a community endowment / I know they've had to do a lot of shuffling to continue to get that to pay for itself, but it's a wonderful facility for their community, and they never would have been able to do it just on the, with the money that they had.
Well, I happen to agree with Holly that this is a subject we've kind of skirted around, but I think we need to make a concerted effort to see how we can raise revenue. Not just, traditionally it's raising taxes, but, there are other ways that we can pursue. And I would agree that in the next several months, we should start a program to see what we can come up with.
Yeah, I have a question, and then I would like to make a motion. My question is not necessarily just last year, but the difference between what we budgeted and coming out with a substantial whatever, in the black. Part of that, I would expect, is public works things that were scheduled to be done last fiscal year, but ended up going into this fiscal year. And then, that's correct? That's
correct.
Probably a big chunk of it. Is some of it also delaying in getting new staff on board? Some of it that we've budgeted staff positions, but there's a few months before they come online?
Yes.
Right,
So both of those things?
Okay, so there's two sides to that. There's some staff that we're suggesting that the position will go away, but they'll be here till September.
Ah, okay.
And then there's the other side where we have positions like the HR analyst, that they probably won't start until
Right.
September. So there's,
So that's kind of, from year to year, those things can
They
They
shift around.
fluctuate,
Yeah.
and, it's
So-
due to a variety of reasons.
Right. Okay, well, I would like to make a motion that we adopt the budget as revised and as presented tonight.
I'll second.
Along that discussion did you have any discussion with the tax collector about property tax?
I emailed the tax collector, but I haven't received a response yet.
Because, yeah, I want to know what the answer to your question was.
Yeah, I'm not comfortable with 100, and I've heard all of these things before. I'm not comfortable with $162,000, but do we have anybody in the audience that wishes to address the budget before we vote? Okay, well, yes.
I'm Dinah Hutton. I work with Nuestra Alianza, and I would just like to say that, is this on?
Sorry, it's to the TV audience, so
It doesn't amplify.
it doesn't amplify in here.
Oh, okay. I'd just like to make sure that you do not cut the police budget further. We have the pleasure here of very little gang activity. There's a lot in Ukiah, a lot in Fort Bragg. We don't have it. And also, I would be very sad to see 911 be outsourced. The whole point of 911 is fast.
Mm-hmm.
And any chance that that might not happen could cost a life. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Diana. Anybody else care to make any comments on the budget? Roll call vote then, please.
Excuse me, Stransky,
Yes.
Strong,
Yes?
Madable,
Yes.
Weinstein,
Yes.
Mayor Burton.
No. So that budget is adopted. We will move is everything up to date on the consent calendar?
I'll move, we approve the consent calendar?
I'd like to just pull item B for a little brief discussion if we can.
Okay. Do we have a second on the consent, items A on the consent calendar?
Yes.
Anybody have any comments on the consent calendar?
I did give Kathy a few typographic changes. She got those.
We don't need it. I'm sure they'll be happy to make those corrections. Roll call vote on item A then, which is the minutes of several special meetings and 3 council meetings.
Councilmember Stransky.
Yes.
Strong,
Yes,
Madable,
Yes.
Weinstein.
Yes.
Mayor Burton.
Yeah.
and thank you, Kathy, for bringing us up to date. It's great.
So item B is the purchase of a used police vehicle from Automart. It cost $22,000 with $3,200 set up from asset forfeiture.
Yeah, the only question I have here is, and I'm sure it's fine, but, I look at the price and I look at the mileage and I'm thinking, this doesn't look right. This is like,
It's a used vehicle that it was, Jim Montalvo goes to the auctions and obtained this. It belonged to another municipality and for whatever reason they traded it in. I've test drove it. It looks like it's a good mechanical. He has no idea. He buys some vehicles that are salvage certificates, other vehicles at auctions, and this one was not a salvage certificate vehicle. He's inspected it. Again, it's one of those opportunities that doesn't come up that often, and considering that a brand new one would run us about $34,000 to $36,000.
Oh, was that all? I thought that would have been more. Seriously, I mean, for...
So I think it's a good deal.
And you've inspected it as well? You've had your people look at it, I mean, mechanically and everything?
Well, I'm confident the people that he would use are the same people that I would take it to, so.
Okay. And then you still need to put some money into it to upgrade it for police?
Yeah, we actually have repurpose a radio, and then we would just have to put light and siren in it to make it legal.
But the vehicle itself is set up as a police vehicle, correct?
Well, yeah, it could be used as a
Suspension and everything?
Yeah, it's a former police vehicle.
Okay, good.
So.
Well, I'm good with that then. I would make a motion that we, what do we want to do? Purchase the vehicle?
I'll second.
Any public comment on this? Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Strange?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Vanderbilt?
Yes.
Weinstein?
Yeah.
Mayor Burton?
Yes. Right to appeal, there you have informational reports on just warrants. Then right to appeal, persons who are dissatisfied with the decision of the city council may have a right to review of that decision by a court. The city's adopted 1094.6 of the Code of Civil Procedure, which generally limits to 90 days time within the decisions that city boards and agencies may be judicially challenged. We need to recess as the city council and convene as the planning commission to discuss this next item, which is a discussion and a possible approval of a request to waive boundary line adjustment application fee for Mr. Morris Kaplan. Hey, Dusty, what's going on?
Mayor Burton, we've got a request from Mr. Morris Kaplan, a resident of Willits, to waive the application fee for a boundary line adjustment. You have our agenda summary report. It explains that the current application fee is $450. Approximately, or $300 would go to engineering, $150 goes to the community development department. And it's about 15 hours of staff time typically to process an application of this type. Two parcel boundary line adjustment. He's looking to merge two separate parcels that he owns off of East Valley Street. I've provided a couple maps to the council to sort of help explain the justification or the need for the boundary line adjustment. You've got a color aerial photo identifying three different parcels, two of which are owned by Mr. Kaplan, another owned by Minor. There's two blue squares that represent two separate water hookups that Mr. Kaplan has currently. One of them extends from East Valley and goes through the Minor property before arriving at the Kaplan residence on parcel 34. His other water hookup extends on the parcel 32 to serve, I think, a commercial building that exists on that site. Mr. Kaplan has had issues with the water line that runs from East Valley through the Minor property to serve his house. And due to those issues, would like to use the water meter that goes to parcel 32 and then bring it over to his residence, and that's represented by that red line that you see there. The city has a provision that a water hookup will not serve a separate parcel, meaning each parcel will have its own water hookup. So Mr. Kaplan is wanting to merge his two properties to make one so that he can make use of that water connection and not utilize the one that runs underneath the Minor house. There is no policy that staff is aware of that allows us to waive a fee based on a financial hardship. And staff is recommending that you do not waive the application fee. But
Dusty, what is the typical hourly rate for borderline adjustment?
Well, hourly rate.
Yeah, I mean, well, how do you come up with the price, the $450?
Our fee schedule has a flat price for boundary line adjustment, it's $450.
Okay, because that works out to $30 an hour, and that sounds pretty cheap.
Most of the planning applications are not set up for cost recovery.
Which is another
So
thing
that
we should probably deal with.
Yeah. Okay.
So are both of his properties accessed from East Valley?
Yeah, it appears that there's a driveway off of East Valley that maybe goes through the minor property before reaching
Okay.
property in the back.
And so this doesn't
show that.
alter the minor property.
East San Francisco.
That is separately owned, and this doesn't.
Yeah, that's only shown on here for the reason that
For
the
reference,
water line
okay.
goes through that property to serve the Kaplan property in the back.
And just for everyone's reference, this is the former creamery building.
Yeah,
So
I
if-
figured that,
yeah.
yeah.
My concern, and I certainly understand hardship cases and not being able to afford fees. I get that. But I also know that this is a discretionary choice to do a boundary line adjustment. You know, it's really fine as it is. And I think that there could potentially be value gained by the property owner in doing this property line adjustment. So that sort of makes me think that, you know, they would potentially be benefiting in the future from this action. And I don't think that we can reasonably take sides to not accept a fee. I wouldn't want to do a gift of public funds, basically, that's.
So where's the boundary line? What is explain to me again the boundary
We don't
line.
currently have an application, but as explained by Mr. Kaplan in his letter to the city manager requesting the waiver, essentially we'd be taking the two parcels and getting rid of that property line to make one. So two properties would become one. So essentially it's just the elimination of that common property line between the two Kaplan properties.
So can I ask, it seems like it's not really a boundary line adjustment, it's a merging of two lots into one.
Is that what that's called?
But that's
Yeah,
the
that's
same.
done through a boundary line adjustment.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
With a
it's-
boundary line adjustment, you can never create additional parcels, but you can merge.
Okay,
Yeah.
so essentially he's wanting to eliminate a separate lot that's on paper, but he owns both lots and make it all one lot.
Correct.
So that he can legally use the 1 meter and the one water line.
Correct.
Well, I find the timing is a little ironic, given the discussion we just finished 10 minutes ago. And, you know, I'm not sure if I'm in the mood to cost the city any more money than we already spend without getting return. Because it's actually impacting the entire community, not just this one person.
And there may be people here to speak to this, but I'd be willing to make a motion to reject the fee waiver request.
Well, that would be the recommended action, I think.
Deny the fee waiver request?
Right.
Well, we would.
The
could have-
recommended, I would make a motion for the recommended action for
Okay.
that one, though.
That's fine. Is there a second to that? And then I will open it up to public.
I'll second.
Do we have anybody who would like to address this issue of the Kaplan boundary line adjustment? Seeing none, we'll close the public comment. And if no one raises their hand, I'm going to call a vote.
I just wanted to comment. I am somewhat sympathetic with a merging of two lots as opposed to going through all this trouble for making, moving a property line. It seems from the point of view of the property owner like it's much more convenient for him to have the 1 meter to serve his entire property. So I feel like he probably is a low-income person. I don't know. I'm somewhat sympathetic to lowering it just on the basis of hardship, but I understand the argument against it too, so I will probably vote no.
Because there's also, just so you know, there's also an argument why this property owner and not another property owner. So you are opening up a whole can of worms
that's true.
of, like, oh, this person, can't afford to pay that fee. Or this, I mean, that's.
Yeah, I understand.
That's just another one of the reasons why I think it's a bit of a slippery
Can of
slope.
worms, yeah.
Especially given the fact that our current fees don't cover the full cost of doing the work. But that's a discussion for another day.
Can we have a roll call vote, please?
I want to have a
Yep, sorry.
question first. Your motion was a recommended action, right?
Correct.
Thank you. Yes.
Councilmember Stransky.
Still yes, I think.
Strong.
Yes.
Free vote.
Madden.
Yes.
Weinstein.
Yes.
Member.
Yes. Okay, we will now
Despite my comment.
adjourn as the planning commission and reconvene as the city council and move on to city managers' reports and recommendations.
Thank you. So this agenda item I have is discussion of possible action to authorize a change in hours of operation at city offices. And this is coming about because over the last couple of years, we've done quite a bit of reorganizing, and positions have been eliminated. Going back even further to 2009, when we had 8 or 9 city staff that essentially left within a short period of time. Of those positions, only 1 position was authorized to be filled. So since 2009, we've had significant staff reductions, yet the workload has not been reduced in any fashion, and in fact, I think has increased as a result of various, regulatory agencies and various projects in the communities, the Main Street planning project and rehab, that certainly is a major matter on the city's plate. In recent months, we have struggled here at City Hall to cover the bases. We've had absences, some due to illness, some, people do need to take vacations, and so it's been a struggle just to cover the bare minimum, let alone trying to get on top of anything. And so we're looking for a way to carve out some dedicated time for staff to, have that catch-up time. And so what I'm proposing is that we change the hours of operation to the public from Monday through Friday from 9 to 5 to Monday through Thursday from 9 to 5:30. And Fridays would be closed to the public every Friday. Every other Friday would be a work day, and on the alternating Fridays would be a day off, because employees would now be working a 9-hour day instead of an 8-hour day to accommodate those extended hours Monday through Thursday. So by doing this, we have, that dedicated time every other Friday for catch-up, for in-services. That's been another thing that's been challenging to accommodate. I mean, we talked about at the last council meeting the idea of cutting out trainings, but we can do a lot of cross-training in-house, but it's difficult to do again when
if people are coming in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now, a couple of years ago, I recall, due to budget constraints, City Hall was closed on Fridays for a period of time.
That was prior to 2009.
Was that long ago? Time flies.
Yes.
But I don't recall hearing any issues with that.
Well, I think that I wasn't here at that time, but change is always an adjustment.
Yeah, but I mean, there wasn't anything, people weren't banging on the doors and burning effigies or anything.
It was that way when I started here, we were closed on Fridays.
Okay.
But whereas that was a budget saving measure in the sense that no one was here and we weren't paying staff, this will be a bonus in the sense that staff will have dedicated focused time to work. And in my day job, there is a day where the doors aren't open, and I cannot tell you how. I mean, the phone still rings, so you have to figure out a plan for the phone. But it's very hard to do any sort of training or orientation or any sort of thing like that when you don't have just dedicated time to do it. So I would be happy to approve staff's recommended action.
Is that a motion?
It is.
I'll second.
Well, I'm a traditionalist. I think you go to work on Monday and you get off on Friday.
They still do.
public wants to come to City Hall between Monday and Friday, they ought to be doing that, so that's,
But they're gaining a half hour,
I,
so now they can come in after work.
I get it, but I don't get it.
Well, all 5 of you asked me separately over the last several months what you could do to support me and ease things up a little bit, and so this is one thing I'm asking for.
Very supportive of
Any
that.
comment on the new hours at City Hall? We have a roll call vote, please.
Yes. Councilmember Stransky,
No.
Madrigal, or excuse me, Strong,
Yes.
Madrigal,
Yes.
Ornstein,
Yes.
and Burton.
No. But it'll work. We'll make it work. Okay.
And we can just get rid of the phone system. Right, Larry, if we get rid of the phone system and have answering the phone again?
We don't want to go there, okay?
Right.
Let's move on to department recommendations. Anything for this? Did I skip something? Oh, I'm sorry, you do have verbal.
I know, I feel like I should call Dr. Ruud
I
back.
know, but I can go talk to him.
Okay.
So I did want to talk about the city trees again. I have brought this up over the last several council meetings, and there have been a couple of recent newspaper articles about that. Bill Wilson, our public works supervisor, and I went out Monday morning and met with one of the residents near City Park to talk about the tree issue. We certainly understand how upsetting it is to see trees removed. So we did delay. We had, they had noticed the neighborhood for no parking on the State Street side of the park this week because of tree removal. And, that's caused a reaction, of course. That's not unexpected. I did delay the removal on the State Street trees for a day so I could have a chance to talk with REMIF, who is our liability provider. And, unfortunately, it's pretty cut and dry. We have an obligation. Well, no,
Yeah, sorry. Bad pun.
Figure of speech.
We absolutely have an obligation to remove these trees when we become aware that they create a public safety hazard. And we actually were essentially formally noticed of that 20 years ago with that report from the arborist to the city. Dr. Ruud asked the question, a very good question, about have we had recent consultation, and yes, we have. It didn't result in a report like it did 20 years ago, but we did actually consult not only with that arborist, but with a local landscaper, and Mr. Wilson isn't here, but I believe there was a third opinion he got as well. So he put a plan together to replace those trees on a phased approach, and so that is what will happen, unless the council directs otherwise, but that has been the plan, and he's working with Dave Watts at Sanhedrin on the trees that are being prepped for the replacements. But it's, understandably, it's worrisome. Somebody told us they're green. I mean, obviously they're not dead. We showed a sample of one of the limbs that had been cut recently, and the outer layer, in fact I have photos here, is still alive, but you can see that the inside of it is not.
Yeah.
That's a limb?
That's
I think he said that one was on one of the ones on this side.
right.
It's
I also wanted
crazy.
to note that our liability insurance will not cover if somebody's injured because of a limb that, injures them. We can't submit that claim to REMIF. That's on us.
This is not a theoretical issue either. I mean, it's not just particular to us. On the evening news, you see all over the Bay Area, big cities that have trees that fall over on cars and people, and I mean, it's a real issue.
At our chief's house? Yeah.
We need to stay ahead of it.
So I guess I want to reassure everyone that while they are being removed, they also will be replaced with new trees. And, of course, it will take time for those new trees to grow and provide the the beauty and the shade that the current ones do, but I would not want my granddaughter to be playing underneath any of those trees at this point.
So are we taking all of them out on State Street?
No, it's every other one, it's every other one.
And then we're going to get new
Bruce?
ones.
Yes.
Yeah, Larry.
The city council back in the late 80s was notified that these trees are bad, and the councils ever since then have just procrastinated, and now it finally happens to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So we got lucky.
right when 3 council members are up for election.
The tree killers.
But I do want to mention that we got an email from a community member asking when we replant the trees and replant the trees on Main Street to do low pollen trees.
Yes,
I don't know
we
if you guys saw that email.
we all received that.
Honestly, that hadn't even occurred to me. So I know that we try to get trees that, the roots don't tear up the sidewalk and things like that, but.
Yeah, it was a great suggestion.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for that information.
And one last thing,
Yes.
Since we're talking about the city park. There was a recent article in one of the local newspapers with some criticism towards the city about not maintaining the city park restrooms. And essentially asserting that we don't maintain them. And I just wanted to let all of you know that we do have our guys out there every morning cleaning and hosing down and out and restocking the restrooms. But we do have our supervisor and 4 public works maintenance personnel that have to cover the entire community, including the pool maintenance at this point.
Right, and it did get a fresh coat of paint.
It did. They started on that painting project at Rec Row so that would be done in time for Frontier Days, and then they moved over to City Park.
Any other reports?
I think we'll cover other stuff under Jim's time and the water rights.
Oh.
And then under ad hoc committees.
Okay, then we will go to city clerk.
Yes, multiple election nominations are still open until August the 12th at 5 p.m. So I advise everybody to come in and get their paperwork, and if you could please call us and make an appointment. It just makes it easier, that way I can dedicate time for that.
Anything else from the finance side of things?
Not right now.
Legal?
Yes, as Adrian just mentioned, we engaged Alan Lilly from our water law attorney from Sacramento to give us his recommendations about whether the city should file for pre-1914 appropriative water rights with the State Water Resources Control Board. And Mr. Lilly has prepared a very comprehensive letter, and he basically summarizes historical news articles and other sources that indicate that in the early 1900s, 1902, a watershed was developed from Davis Creek that supplied municipal water to the city, and that went through some different chains of ownership until the city acquired that entire watershed property and the facilities for collecting, storing, and distributing water to the city. And in view of that, Mr. Lilly has recommended that the city file an application for pre-1914 appropriative water rights with the State Water Resources Control Board. And as reported at our last meeting, staff did that about 3 weeks ago, I would assume.
It was on July 1st, which was that's the date for the annual filing of these statements.
And so staff distributed to the city council with your packets this letter from Mr. Lilly, together with the documentation and the news articles that he relied on to support his position. And this is a public document. Adrian has provided this to the newspapers, and it's available for any public request.
Just a question, the letter is dated July 22nd, but the filing was made July 1st?
Mr. Lilly had emailed, we had communicated via email, and so he had made that recommendation earlier that week, so it was a very short, and once he made that determination, there was a very quick turnaround to get those filings done.
But
And-
essentially, this is what was
Yes,
submitted.
I asked him to please prepare a letter that we could distribute to the
Thank you.
public and to the council to support the action that he
Yeah.
approved and recommended.
It's very thorough and hopeful.
Yeah.
I haven't had a chance to get through the whole thing yet. It's some pretty heavy reading, but so far, it's amazing. I mean, just learning things that I never was aware of before.
And Mr. Lilly doesn't get all the credit for the research. It started with Mayor Burton requested a college student. You can
High school
identify her.
students, right?
Yeah, well, she was.
Yeah, Rachel.
Rachel Camacho.
And she did the bulk of the work.
She
and
did the
then-
work.
Yeah,
Great.
Smart cookie.
cool.
Maybe she'll come back and run the city
And
someday.
the impact of this, if we receive the approval of our pre-1914 rights, is that we can take more water out of, what is the bottom line for us if we prevail in this?
Rather than try and summarize all of that, I would refer you to his letter. He does.
It's in here? Okay.
And there are significant benefits, I mean, this is not a legal opinion, but there are significant benefits to having an earlier water rate. Just one practical example is during the last major restrictions on the drought that the governor put down, they said that people with rights after, I forget what the cutoff date was on the last one, I think it was 18?
14.
14? Yeah, like if you had a right after that, which we thought that we were in that camp, you were not allowed to use any water. So that, and we had to file all these things that said, this actually does supply all the water to our community. We need to do this for health and safety, but I mean, this would put us on the other side of that line, and that's huge.
On page 12, Mr. Lilly summarizes at the subsection E, the benefits of pre-1914 appropriate rights in a concise paragraph. We could read that aloud if you like.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
And thank you, Bruce, for spearheading this, and Rachel for doing the research. Very cool.
Well, it's going to be the document goes on the shelf until I understand it, until such times that there is it's contested, and at that point, then our information is on file. And I think seems to me to be a pretty solid case of pre-14. Again, not a water attorney, but it sure seems like we're in the right side of it. Anyway, I think it's an important document for the city to have, as it owns that watershed. Good. Anything else, Jim?
No.
Chief?
Just some brief comments. First, in the last couple of weeks, in light of what's happening on the national scene, we've had a lot of expressions of support from our local public, from folks dropping off some goodies to just folks wanting to shake our hands out in public. And I am proud to live in a community like this, where we have that connection with the community. So I grew up here, and again, a lot of these folks are just approaching us, and it's really sweet and nice to see that.
That's wonderful.
So then they debuted on 4th of July, and they've been out a couple times, but Officers Mason and Leaf have been out on their bicycles. And it does, I think they've even made an arrest or two now, and they're able to kind of...
Because you don't hear them coming.
You don't hear them coming, but they're also able to get into some of our more remote places with mountain bikes, so it's working out pretty good. They are, I think, they're looking at it as a kind of a personal goal to get in better shape too, so it's doing a twofer there. You're getting patrol and you're getting guys working out, so. And so
Good, thanks, Jerry.
Jerry, before you go,
Save on
I
gas.
just want to say to you and publicly, I took a ride with Sergeant Donahue yesterday, and it's been too long since I've taken a ride, and I'm glad I did, and I'm going to try to do it more frequently. But I shared it with him, and I want to share it with you, that we made a few stops, not a whole lot of action, but I have to say that our young police officers are very professional. I mean, you see a lot of stuff on television, with the first reaction is to body slam somebody to the ground or pull your gun or something like that. But I was watching these guys making their stops, and, there was never any issue of violence or action, or it was a very calm demeanor. Everything was cool and professional, and I'm just so proud to have your officers protecting us. They do an excellent job, and they do it professionally. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, John, are you gonna, or community development, Dusty, do you have anything? Sit down, John. I got out of line here, I'll get skunked up here.
Get there.
Just briefly, I think, though. Very quickly, we've entered into agreement with Michael Baker International, formerly PMC, to help us update our housing element. We've got a kickoff meeting next week with them to get that going. Streets and Alley project, we're continuing to move forward with that project. We're adapting design concepts based on community input, as well as suggestions, recommendations from our technical advisory group. We're still on track to get a full report to the council in September. Let's see, we're still receiving a number of current planning applications, so I'm glad to say that the Community Development Department is staying busy.
Good. Thanks, Dusty. Mr. Sherman.
Thank you. Before I get into my department, I just want to make one comment about Willits PD. I've been involved in a number of incidents with them, and I've never seen anybody treat people with such respect. And I think that's why they're members of the community, not just policemen in our town. They know the people they're dealing with, and they're respectful no matter what that person's circumstance is. And I want to commend them for it. Let's see, we'll start with floodplain development. We had an audit on, was it Tuesday, from Ray Lee from the Department of Water Resources and FEMA, and that went well. I've got a little catching up to do paperwork-wise, but that went well, and as far as they're concerned, things look pretty good here.
John, what were they auditing? The flood
The
stuff?
floodplain administration, basically going through building permits and seeing if we made the right requirements for the zone that they're in and that type of thing. And I tell you, a little bit of it had my head spinning, but next month I'll be going to some more training up in Reading, and they'll help out, but getting there as fast as I can. Code enforcement, things have gone pretty quiet other than the marijuana cultivation, and this last week we had 5 cases. 2 of those cases have been eradicated or closed. I expect that the other 3 cases will be closed by the beginning of next week. Working with the property owner. The violators are tenants, and so it's kind of tricky to work with the tenants through the property owner, because, as you know, he can't just show up and do what he wants there either. Unfortunately, they've locked him out as well. So, let's see, building. Things are starting to pick back up. Several sets of plans for custom homes that have been submitted. So we're getting there, and we're looking forward to some commercial applications, but we haven't got them yet.
What is the status of the floodplain mapping and the trying to see if there's any way we can reduce the number?
Yeah, we're in a 90-day period, their last appeal period. And at the direction of the mayor, in the last meeting, I've gone out and sought some quotes to do the engineering, the hydrology and hydraulics work necessary to appeal the FEMA maps. And we haven't accepted anything, and I don't have a bid in my hand yet, but they're both coming. Both hydrologists that we've contacted are very highly respected in their field, and both of them have worked for the city of Willits in the past.
So we would anticipate having a proposal to the council for approval at the August 10th meeting?
Yeah, I believe so.
We have a letter prepared before that to send to FEMA to, or are we going to let the hydrologist write that letter requesting their methodologies?
No, I think you're right. We will have a letter.
And I can sign it.
Mm-hmm.
90 days goes by fast.
And to explain that we may need an extension.
An extension, yes.
So we want to get that in early.
Yeah, and I've talked with them verbally about it, but I agree, we need to put a letter
We need to
together
put it in and get it to that individual. Yeah. Okay, good. Thanks, John. Okay, I think we can move on to committee reports. MCOG?
MCOG has not met, and it will meet the first Monday of this new month coming up, which I guess is Monday.
August 1st.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it is. We're running out of.
we're running out of July.
What about LAFCO?
LAFCO did not meet.
MTA?
There was a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, but it has been postponed, so they won't meet till August, late August.
MSWA?
Haven't met.
Have not met. The League?
League, the next meeting is in Arcata, coming up, but not yet.
Water and wastewater, I don't believe met. Ed did meet though, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. Dusty, if you can help, just trying to remember.
It was all written
We
up.
had a good turnout. I know that. Oh, do you have notes on it? Or I think I can remember.
Yeah, sort of.
Okay, you go, and then I'll,
Okay. Yeah,
I'll
no,
back you up
it
if
was
there's-
well attended. It seems like every time we have a Viva Ed meeting, we have more people there. And I think that's because we have important topics that we're discussing and issues that we're trying to tackle. And so the council remembers that we did come before you and get a prioritization list, which was to look at dealing with the issue of chronically vacant commercial properties, commercial buildings, expanding our sphere of influence, and
Signage.
highway signage, and how we can use highway signage to promote our local economy. And so we're moving forward on all of those issues. And I don't know, do you want me to kind of go in depth on each of those, or give a little progress report, or?
Sure.
Yeah? Okay.
Short one, you bet.
Yeah. So with, we tried to brainstorm various ideas on how to deal with our vacant commercial properties, and we're tackling it from a few different ways, looking at providing potentially incentives like waiving or reducing building application fees or planning fees. Then, we're trying to deal with the fact that we recognize that we have some folks that seem to purchase these properties as investment properties. They don't live in our community, so how do we sort of capture the community cost that occurs when you leave these buildings vacant? Then, we're also recognizing that we have folks that are looking to establish businesses in Willits but aren't able to find a commercial piece of property that's turnkey ready. Substantial improvements are required to complete that. And so trying to incentivize or get the ball moving on some of those situations, we're looking at potentially introducing a registration fee. Might start out very small, something like $50. and we would generate a list of vacant properties that then we could share with prospective businesses coming into the community. But if that, property continued to be vacant for a long period of time, 5-7 years, looking at significantly increasing that registration fee and hopefully pay for some of our building folks, our fire guys, to be able to go into some of these long-standing vacant buildings and make sure that there are outstanding issues that need to be dealt with.
And some
we're also
commu-
looking at
yeah.
essentially tightening up or increasing the definition of a public nuisance. And so kind of going beyond just the aesthetic part of it and really getting more at the building integrity and paying attention a little bit more to what's going on inside the building rather than just the outside. So
I was just going to add that part of the idea with the registration is that you could have annual inspections. Right now, I mean, some of these properties have been vacant for, 10, 15 years. They're not habitable. But by being able to inspect it, the fire department could get in there and see, making sure that no one is squatting in these spaces, because that creates a safety issue for law enforcement and the fire department if they have to go in, if there's a fire, just sort of giving us a little more information on what we're looking at.
And these aren't unique ideas. These are other ideas that other communities have adopted, both big cities and small cities like ourselves. With the highway sign,
$50 per what, per year?
Probably maybe an annual fee.
It seems very low. I mean, if they have a business operating there, they would be having to pay business tax, business license. So by not having one and creating a need for inspection and abating any nuisances that might be developing that we haven't been able to see because they've locked up. And I think as an incentive to try to get people to charge reasonable amount to rent and have their buildings in productive, beneficial uses is, we want to incentivize that. So if the fee is too low, then A, we're not covering our costs, and B, they're not incentivized.
And that feels like part of the balancing act, where you really want to respect land use rights, but at the same time you want to introduce that community cost for choosing to keep that building vacant in some sort of disrepair.
So, I'm sure by looking at what other communities are doing, but let's try to be as proactive on that as we can be.
Well, anything will come before the full council, and we'll obviously be running it by Jim. But another thing that Dusty had mentioned in his comments when we were talking about it, Ed, was that in order to not have a place vacant, you could have a nonprofit in there, or temporarily, or you could, there's ways that the property owner could potentially fill the space and get out of the vacant property requirement, but is still having some use and some, maybe a reduced rate. Or I thought that was kind of an interesting suggestion.
John, you have the ability to enter with notification properties to check for public safety violations, as does the fire department, I believe. So that none of these,
and the code enforcement
right, none of these properties are
locked up.
Out of
Yeah.
bounds.
If the city and the fire department need to check them to be conformance with minimum building standards and health and safety standards, might take 2 weeks to get in it or some period of time, but that's an existing right that the city has.
There's another aspect to this that I think a lot of people are just reluctant to go down that path. I mean, you talked about using incentives to get the property owners to develop their properties, but that's the carrot. Then there's the stick. And, let's face it, we're very aware of derelict buildings in this town that are just above that point where they can be, closed down for violations of health and safety codes. But they're still a nuisance, and they're bringing the whole community down. And that's not an editorial comment. I think that's fact. You ask anybody on the street how they feel about, and it's a bad thing. It seems like the city has the right and the responsibility to make sure that the properties are used properly, you know, and according to some general plan that we have. And having vacant buildings in our town, I'm pretty sure is not part of our general plan. I took from some of your comments, when you talked about redefining the nuisance, that's your thinking as well. Did I get that right?
Yeah, I mentioned the expansion of sort of what constitutes a public nuisance, and so we do have existing definition of public nuisance, and we've empowered our building official and our fire chief to be able to enter these buildings for public safety reasons. But it might be that just upkeeping the outside appearance and the landscaping, the garbage on the outside, the idea is to maybe expand that to include the inside of the building. So if you have a building that's in disrepair and is not in a condition that it can be made use of, that in some jurisdictions, that's considered a public nuisance.
So all I want to do, this is a report from a previous
highway
meeting, and we've got to stay.
I would like to discuss it to some point in detail.
Well, we can do it, but it's not.
And it was brought up at Revive Ed that we won't get too far down the path before bringing it up to the council, because once we're taking Jim's time and stuff, it gets very sensitive.
It does, but
we expect to periodically check in with the full council and make sure we're staying on the right path.
In a way that we can, have a full-blown discussion.
We will. It'll be agendized.
Okay, good.
Okay. Yeah, made note. Thank you. Looking to establish highway signage to promote our local economy. We're looking at the idea of establishing civic-type billboards on both sides of the city. So maybe between Laytonville and Willits, and between Ukiah and Willits. And so we're exploring different ideas on how to accomplish that, recognizing that we're subject to the county sign regulations as well as Caltrans sign regulations. Beyond that, we're also looking to potentially establish signage, recognizing that we have the Veterans Memorial and the museum off of one of the exits. So working with Caltrans to get understanding of how that process might work, and looking for them to support those ideas. We're also looking to maybe do a little bit wayward signing on Highway 20 so that folks know that downtown Willits is here to the left. So those types of ideas are being explored as well. And then regarding the sphere of influence, the LAFCO just recently brought on a new executive officer. I was able to have an informal lunch date and make sure that they understand where we're at with looking and exploring, expanding our sphere of influence. So I look forward to having more meetings with LAFCO staff.
Right, and in that regard, I believe we're going to have some meeting here. It's kind of under our committee reports, I guess. Still looking to schedule a meeting with Tom Woodhouse to discuss revenue sharing ideas, tax sharing ideas within the sphere of influence, specifically the areas impacted.
That's an important one.
So, thank you, Dusty. Barbara, you had your hand up. That did get into a little bit of a discussion. I would entertain just a minute or two if you, thank you. Go ahead.
It was just a comment on this nuisance, new ordinance. Is this going to?
Oh, that's going to come up next.
Oh, sorry.
We'll bring it, it's going to come up in just a minute, and then we will take public comment on that. That was Revive Ed.
Thank you, because I completely forgot that I was going to have to report on that.
And the ad hoc committees, Caltrans relinquishment, we actually are rescheduling. We were scheduled to have them.
Well, the ad hoc committee met.
We met
last week.
to just discuss things, but we haven't met with Caltrans.
Yes.
I did want to report to you, though, that city staff, myself and Rod and Jeremy and Dusty did meet with Mauricio yesterday so that he could share some information from their staff meetings that he felt would be helpful to us. So with that, I would like to schedule another ad hoc committee meeting so we can
Yeah, we scheduled our ad hoc meeting in advance of this meeting that was supposed to occur yesterday to try and develop an understanding of how we were going to try and integrate our $1.5 million into their project, and the result of our ad hoc meeting on that was that we probably needed to do a little more homework before we met with Caltrans. So now we'll take whatever staff met, well, just, like, you heard it just as I did. So we'll try and pick those pieces, put together with where we are now, and try and
Make
come
sure
up
we get
with-
the biggest bang for our buck.
trying to figure out a cohesive strategy going forward. Any other committee reports? EDFC?
EDFC met with a business meeting a couple weeks ago, and then on August 17th, we're going to have a sort of all-day or 9 to 3 retreat where we're going to strategize into the future and kind of take stock of where we're headed. So that should be, and we have a new clerical person on staff that's helping a lot, as well as some of the financial records were falling behind, and now we're catching up. So things are being.
So you'll advocate for investment in Willits?
You bet. You bet. Okay.
Okay, and so NCRA?
NCRA, they canceled their last meeting, so they'll be one in August.
Any council member reports or recommendations?
This is quasi good and welfare, but I just wanted to bring up the Mendo Mill grand opening that was on Saturday. I'm just really pleased. It was great to get to say hi to the Mayfield family. Ukiah has a lot more competition down there with Friedman's and Home Depot, so sometimes I think that the Ukiah store gets more attention. And so it was really nice to see such a huge community investment from the folks at Mendo Mill. And now they're open, and that, when they take down the old building, I mean, that's gonna be a huge deal. It's gonna be parking where the old facility was. So it's a significant investment in our community, and I appreciate it.
Mike Mayfield was sharing with me on Saturday morning that so they had this 3-day, Friday, Saturday, Sunday grand opening event with all their stores, with Willits being the highlight of that. And he said that the day before on Friday they had the biggest day of sales in their company's history.
Wow.
Really?
With the Willits store coming in number 2
All right.
with all their stores.
Yeah.
Cool.
I have one item. I would like to announce that on August 20th, it's a Saturday, Well is having an efficient living tour. And so traditionally, we've had a garden or a farming tour and encourage people to grow their own food and sort of things like that. But this year, we're doing a tour of water and energy efficient buildings, and we're going to be going to Drip Works and looking at their water efficient setup there. We're going to several homes that have a combination of energy and water efficient features, and we're also going to be teaching people about how they can qualify for low interest loans and or grants to make those kinds of improvements so that the community can be as efficient with energy and water as possible. And so that's on August 20th, and it's free for current WELL members, and it's $15, including a WELL membership and lunch for other people. 9:30, and we'll be meeting at the Willits Environmental Center, 9:30 in the morning on the 20th of August.
So I would report out that I joined John Sherman, and Holly was there too, city manager, and Dusty and some of us did a tour of the old AM&D facility on East Hill Road, maybe yesterday or
Monday.
before.
Monday.
And their remodeling project is close to being completed.
It's massive.
And they're clearly intending to make a nursery of it of some sort. It is designed, it has all of the accessories that one would want to do an intensive gardening or nursery project in there. So it's not currently got a occupancy permit yet, I don't think, but it's closing in on it, and that.
And I did speak to someone today that was saying that they're interested in inviting the other council members. We can't all be there.
Right.
We can't all do anything at once, so So expect to hear more from them.
Are we going to have a discussion on that? Because I had heard that he also has a similar operation in Oakland. He doesn't?
No.
We
But
got-
let's just leave it at that for right now. Yeah, I think that discussion will eventually work its way back here at some point. Let's move on to the discussion and possible adoption of our ordinance amending the municipal code. Chapter 1.12 entitled Code Enforcement.
I'll move the recommended action. As we know, we did discuss this at length before. This is the next
second
step
it.
in the process.
Do we have any public comment on this item? This would be your time, Barbara.
Yeah, code enforcement.
Yes, my name is Barbara Plaza. I was concerned about, is this code enforcement going to be for commercial and businesses only, or is it going to overflow into residential? Because right now, ever since I bought my property, I have been a complete nuisance to everybody on that street there, especially Bill Schaefer. So I just don't know if this is going to override into a
No nuisance.
private thing.
No nuisance to me. But yes, it involves any properties within the city of Willits that are in violation of their zoning or health and safety standards.
And to,
Okay.
yeah.
Do we have any good and welfare this evening? Oh,
wait,
excuse me.
yes.
We need to vote. We need to vote.
And I just want to say for the public who is just hearing about it, it's not a large departure from our prior code enforcement ordinance, but it does give the city more tools to move more expeditiously, and it does allow, it clarifies the hearing process and property owners' rights and things like that, so.
And so this ordinance would become effective 30 days after adoption.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Councilmember Stransky?
Yes.
Strong?
Yes.
Madrigal?
Yes.
Wallenstein?
Yes.
Mayor Burton?
Yes.
And I do have good and welfare.
You're
I do.
anxious. I don't even get to introduce it. Maybe I ought to just give you the gavel. Do we have any good and welfare this evening?
This was almost a council member report as well, because it's a city property, but the art center was power washed this morning, revealing a interesting shade of turquoise green, which I don't know if anyone remembers that building being, like the color of that Post-it note, like turquoise. But it's really exciting to see that building getting spruced up, and I think it's really going to add to the streetscape. And I do also want to thank the city for being a cooling station. It was really tricky being at the gallery today, not wanting to have the doors open, because that way people know that we're open, but we wanted to make sure to keep the air conditioning inside, just to make sure that everyone is taking care of themselves in this heat. It's pretty crazy.
Are they going to paint the building after the power wash it?
Yes, and they're gonna do some minor repair, stucco prep, I should say. It's a pale yellow color.
We have the closed session tonight, Mr. Lance. I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
I'll second.
Second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you for joining us.